I died watching my wife's text messages light up my shattered phone. Eric's name, their secret plans, 5 years of marriage ending in twisted metal and betrayal. Then I woke up 5 years in the past. On the day we first met, she ran to her ex behind my back from the very beginning. While I worked overtime building our future, Sophie was stealing company money for Eric's failing art gallery, their hotel receipts, their weekend getaways. Their whispers about an unfortunate accident that would solve all their problems. My accident, this time with my future knowledge. I won't confront her, I won't beg, I won't die on that rainy road. I'll build my empire in silence while she thinks I'm blind to her lies. And when she least expects it, I'll walk away cold, leaving her to face the consequences of her betrayal alone. Some say love deserves second chances. I say some people don't deserve a first. I always thought my life would end in old age, surrounded by family, not upside down in my car with the dashboard slowly crushing my chest. The impact came without warning, metal tearing, glass shattering, and the sudden silence that followed as I hung suspended in my seatbelt. Rain tapped against the crumpled roof like impatient fingers. I wasn't supposed to be driving home early. Sophie wasn't expecting me for hours. But the client meeting had canceled, and I thought I might surprise her with dinner. Instead, the surprise was all mine. As my vision blurred and breathing became difficult, I saw her phone on the passenger floor where it had fallen during the crash. The screen lit up with an incoming message, the name clear even through my fading consciousness. Eric. The preview text appeared below his name. Did you tell him yet? We can't wait much longer. Blood dripped from my forehead onto the roof of the car as more messages continued to appear. 3 years of suspicions, of doubts I'd buried beneath trust and love, confirmed in my final moments. I'll leave him after the promotion next month. We just need to be patient. I never loved him like I love you. The words burned into my consciousness, my last thoughts not of my life but of the lies that had filled it. The pain in my chest was no longer just from the impact. How long had she been planning this? How long had I been nothing but a stepping stone? Then darkness claimed me. A strange weightlessness. Peace, until I gasped awake, sitting bolt upright in bed. My old bed, in my old apartment. The sun streamed through blinds I hadn't owned in years. My heart raced as I scrambled for my phone on the nightstand. The date displayed made no sense. September 15, 2018, 5 years earlier. The day I would meet Sophie at Rachel's gallery opening. My hands trembled as I stumbled to the bathroom, checking my reflection in the mirror. Younger, unburdened by the weight of betrayal that hadn't happened yet. My hair still thick, without the premature gray strands stress had given me. I touched the spot on my chest where the steering column had crushed me. Nothing. A second chance, I whispered, the memory of Sophie's text messages still burning in my mind. The messages that revealed her years of deception. Her affair with Eric, her plans to leave me, perhaps even her knowledge of the accident that would take my life. I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the implications. I had lived these 5 years before. I knew what stocks would soar, which companies would fail, which investments would make me wealthy beyond imagination. But more importantly, I knew Sophie's true nature before I ever fell into her trap. My phone chimed with a reminder. Rachel's gallery opening, 8 p.m. The event where I would meet Sophie for the first time. Where she would laugh at my jokes, touch my arm lightly, and look at me with those eyes that made me believe I was the only man in the world for her. I nearly canceled, nearly chose to avoid the entire timeline of pain that awaited me, but something stopped me. A cold clarity was forming in my mind, replacing the shock of my rebirth. What if this wasn't about avoiding pain? What if it was about justice? I showered and dressed with purpose, choosing the charcoal suit I knew Sophie had admired the first time around. If I was going to rewrite history, I would need to follow the script initially, just enough to understand all the players. To see all the signs I had missed the first time. As I knotted my tie, I made a promise to myself. This time I wouldn't be blinded by love. This time I would be the one in control. This time, when Sophie betrayed me, I would be ready. The gallery buzzed with the same conversations I vaguely remembered having before. The same art hung on the walls, mediocre pieces sold to people more interested in appearing cultured than appreciating creativity. The same wine was being served, a cheap Pinot Grigio that the gallery owner pretended was exclusive. Rachel waved me over exactly as she had 5 years ago, or 5 years from now. My heart stopped when I saw Sophie standing beside her, beautiful in that blue dress, laughing at something someone said. The sight of her hit me like another car crash. memories of love and betrayal colliding inside me. Marcus, meet Sophie, Rachel said. Sophie, this is the friend I've been telling you about. Sophie extended her hand. Nice to meet you. Rachel says you work in finance. I took her hand, feeling the same electricity I remembered, fighting the urge to both embrace her and run away. Her skin was soft, her smile genuine, at least to anyone who didn't know what she would become. What she was already beneath the surface. Investment analysis, I replied, studying her face for signs of the woman who would betray me, who would plan to leave me once she had extracted everything she needed. That's when I noticed him in the corner of the gallery, watching her from behind a sculpture. Eric. In my first life, I never realized he was there that night, never recognized the significance of Sophie's occasional glances in his direction. Now it was obvious. They already knew each other. They were already connected in some way she would never admit to me. Sophie tilted her head slightly, that gesture I once found endearing. Rachel says you just moved back to the city. Where were you before? Chicago, I answered, the script playing out exactly as before. But I miss the energy here. There's something about this city that feels like possibility. I know exactly what you mean, she said, touching my arm lightly. Right on cue. I was just telling Rachel I felt stuck until I moved here last year. Now everything seems to be falling into place. If only I had known then what falling into place meant. Her careful positioning in my life, her calculated moves to become the perfect partner while maintaining her relationship with Eric in the shadows. Despite knowing better, despite the warning screams in my head, I found myself playing along, exchanging numbers, agreeing to coffee later that week. Setting in motion the same beginning, but this time with a very different end in mind. As I drove home that night, memories of my future, her betrayal, and my death swirled in my mind. I knew what was coming, every step of our relationship, every lie she would tell, every moment she would steal from me to give to him. But this time I would be watching. This time I would be building my strength while she thought I was building our life together. This time when she ran to her ex behind my back, I would let her go cold. Coffee with Sophie came 3 days later, just as it had in my previous life. The cafe was the same, her order unchanged, even the sunlight through the windows fell identically across her face. I watched her stir her latte, remembering how I had once found the gesture charming. Now I saw the calculation behind her smile, the careful way she asked questions designed to assess my financial prospects. So what made you choose investment analysis? She asked, leaning forward slightly, creating the illusion of intimate interest. I have a knack for seeing patterns others miss, I replied, a new addition to our original conversation. For recognizing when something isn't what it appears to be. A brief flicker of something, perhaps unease, crossed her face before her smile returned. That must be useful in your line of work. In all aspects of life, I said, holding her gaze until she looked away. Despite knowing better, I found myself falling into the same pattern over the following weeks. Coffee dates evolving into dinners into weekend getaways, nights filled with passion that felt genuine even though I knew they weren't. The physical attraction between us remained undeniable, making it harder to maintain the emotional distance I needed. But this time I built walls she couldn't see. I shared less of myself, revealed fewer vulnerabilities for her to exploit later. When she probed about my childhood, my deepest fears, my greatest dreams, I deflected with half-truths and changed subjects. You're different than other guys, Sophie said one night, 6 months into our relationship, as we lay in bed watching the city lights through my bedroom window. Sometimes I feel like you're holding something back. I kissed her forehead, remembering how in my previous life I had responded by opening myself completely, telling her everything she would later use against me. Just being careful with what matters most. She traced patterns on my chest, right where the steering column would crush me years later. Don't you trust me? Trust is earned over time, I said, watching her reaction carefully. Not given all at once. The slight narrowing of her eyes told me everything. Sophie was used to men surrendering themselves completely, making her betrayal easier later. My resistance intrigued and frustrated her. Meanwhile, I made different financial decisions. Stock purchases I knew would soar, business ventures I'd watch succeed. Investments in cryptocurrency before the boom. Small bets at first to avoid drawing attention, then larger moves as my confidence and capital grew. By our 1-year anniversary, my net worth had quadrupled. I bought a penthouse in the city but kept it in a shell company's name. I established offshore accounts Sophie knew nothing about. I built the foundations of an empire while appearing to simply be a successful young executive. Sophie's interest in me grew proportionally with my success, her affection becoming more demonstrative, her future plans more elaborate. But I caught the signs I'd missed before, the unexplained absences, the texts she hid, the way her stories sometimes didn't quite add up. 4 months after our first anniversary, I had a business trip to Boston. In my previous life, I had changed my flight to return early and surprise her. This time I told her I was returning early but actually arrived 6 hours before I said I would. I found our apartment empty but with clear signs of recent occupation, 2 wine glasses in the sink, a man's jacket left on a chair hastily removed. I said nothing when Sophie returned, watching her create a story about having lunch with a girlfriend, noting how easily the lies came to her. That night while she slept, I checked her phone. There it was, the evidence I knew I would find. Messages with Eric discussing their afternoon together, planning their next meeting, mocking my obliviousness. I took photos of the conversations, then carefully replaced her phone. Knowledge was power, and I was accumulating both. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall, and our relationship deepened in the eyes of our friends and family. Sophie introduced me to her parents, who clearly approved of my financial prospects. I met her friends, many of whom I now realized had been covering for her deceptions all along. "Have you thought about our future?" Sophie asked one evening as we walked along the river. In my first life, this was where I had begun planning my proposal, desperate to secure her love. "I mean, where do you see us in a few years?" "Building something lasting," I replied, carefully ambiguous. She squeezed my hand. "I've never felt this way about anyone before." The lie slid so smoothly from her lips that anyone else would have believed it. But I had seen the truth in those text messages, both in this life and my last. I had seen her profess the same unique love to Eric, perhaps even as recently as that afternoon. I smiled and kissed her, tasting the deceit on her lips. Neither have I. That night, I made a substantial investment in a tech startup I knew would revolutionize the market in 18 months. Another piece in my long game. Sophie's phone lit up on the nightstand at 2:14 a.m. She slipped out of bed thinking I was asleep and took the call in the bathroom. I didn't need to hear the conversation. I already knew who was on the other end. The next day, I checked her location while she claimed to be having lunch with a college friend. The map showed her at that small art gallery where Eric worked. History repeating itself, right on schedule. I didn't confront her. Instead, I focused on building my empire, creating a safety net she knew nothing about. I transferred assets to international accounts, established more shell companies, and documented every instance of her deception. At work, I positioned myself for advancement, cultivating relationships with key board members, demonstrating my value in ways that would be remembered when I needed allies later. I worked longer hours, not from the desperate need to please that had driven me in my previous life, but with strategic purpose. "You seem distracted lately," Sophie said over dinner one night. "Is everything okay with us?" I smiled, thinking of the hotel receipt I'd found in her purse that morning. Eric's name clearly printed on the billing statement. "Everything's exactly as it should be." The concerned look on her face almost made me laugh. She was worried about losing her meal ticket, not about my emotional well-being. To my surprise, Sophie proposed to me on our second anniversary. In my first life, I had been the one on one knee, desperate to secure her love. Now she slid a watch across the table at an expensive restaurant. "Marry me, Marcus," she said, genuine excitement in her eyes, or what appeared to be genuine. "You're the stability I've been looking for." I accepted, but insisted on a detailed prenuptial agreement. The flash of calculation in her eyes confirmed everything. This wasn't about love, it was about securing her position before I could see through her facade. At our engagement party, I excused myself to use the restroom but doubled back when I saw Sophie slip away. Around the corner in an alcove meant for coats, I found them embracing. "It's just for security," Sophie whispered to Eric. "His company is going public next year, we just need to be patient." I smiled and walked away, now fully committed to what needed to be done. The long game was entering its next phase, and Sophie had no idea she was already losing. Our wedding was everything Sophie had dreamed of, a spectacle designed more for appearances than celebration of love. The guest list included business associates I had carefully cultivated over the past 2 years, board members whose loyalty would prove useful, and friends who would remember how happy we seemed when everything fell apart. I watched Sophie glide down the aisle in an expensive gown, her eyes shining with what guests mistook for love but I recognized as triumph. She had secured her position, or so she thought. In the front row, her parents beamed with pride at their daughter's strategic marriage. Among the groomsmen, my brother stood oblivious to the performance unfolding. During the reception, Eric offered his congratulations, his handshake lingering too long on Sophie's waist as I accepted a drink from a passing waiter. Their eyes met briefly, a silent communication I was meant to miss. "Beautiful ceremony," Eric said to me, his smile not reaching his eyes. "You're a lucky man. We all make our own luck," I replied, clinking my glass against his. Eventually, the first months of marriage followed a carefully choreographed routine. Sophie played the devoted wife in public, attending company functions on my arm, charming my colleagues, creating the perfect image of supportive partnership. I played my role too, the successful husband building a future for us, working late hours, traveling for business, creating spaces where her deception could flourish while I documented every instance. I gave Sophie access to one of my company accounts, knowing she would siphon funds to help Eric's struggling art gallery. Each transfer, each withdrawal was recorded, building evidence of embezzlement I would use when the time was right. The money was insignificant compared to the fortune I was quietly amassing through investments only I knew about. One night, returning from a business trip a day early, I found our apartment empty but with clear signs Sophie had entertained someone. Rather than confronting her, I checked the security cameras I had secretly installed months earlier. The footage showed Sophie and Eric entering our home, spending hours in our bed, drinking wine from glasses I had received as wedding gifts. I saved the footage to a secure server and deleted it from the local storage. Another piece of evidence for later use. "How was your trip?" Sophie asked when she returned, hair freshly washed, wearing the innocent expression I had once found so convincing. "Productive," I said, kissing her cheek. "Everything is falling into place," she smiled, relieved by my apparent obliviousness. "I missed you, did you?" I asked, watching her eyes carefully. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across her face. "Of course. The apartment feels empty without you." I nodded, wondering if she ever considered how easily lies came to her now, how completely she had surrendered her integrity for what she thought was a clever strategy. "I've been thinking we should start planning for a family," Sophie suggested on our third anniversary as we dined at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the city. I remembered how desperately I had wanted children with her in my previous life, how I had imagined building a legacy with a woman who truly loved me. "Let's give it another year," I replied. "The company needs my full attention right now." The disappointment on her face wasn't about missing parenthood, but about the delay in binding me more completely to her. Children would make a divorce more complicated, more expensive. Sophie was always thinking ahead, but not as far ahead as I was. By our fourth anniversary, Sophie had embezzled nearly $300,000 from the account I had made available to her. Each dollar was funneled through a series of transactions designed to hide their destination, but I tracked every penny to Eric's gallery and their secret apartment across town. I allowed it, knowing each dollar was evidence of her betrayal. I built a parallel life she couldn't see, one where I could walk away at any moment and leave her with nothing but consequences. During this time, my company's value tripled. The investments I had made based on my future knowledge paid dividends beyond what even I had anticipated. Board members who had once viewed me skeptically now sought my advice. The CEO mentioned retirement, hinting that I was first in line for succession. Sophie basked in the reflected glory, introducing herself as the wife of the company's rising star, leveraging my position for social advancement. She never suspected that I had structured everything to protect myself when the inevitable separation came. As our fifth anniversary approached, the anniversary of my death in my previous life, I completed my preparations. Assets transferred to accounts Sophie couldn't access or even knew existed. Divorce papers prepared with the most ruthless lawyer in the city. Evidence compiled of her affair and financial misconduct. Late one night, I overheard a phone conversation I wasn't meant to hear, Sophie speaking in hushed tones on our balcony while I supposedly slept. "No need to worry," she said to Eric. "After the anniversary dinner at Riverside, he'll be driving home along that winding road, the one with the sharp turn near the cliff. The brakes on his car have been steadily deteriorating." My blood ran cold as pieces fell into place. The accident that had killed me in my previous life hadn't been chance. The brake failure hadn't been a mechanical fault. Sophie and Eric had engineered my death, planning to collect on the substantial life insurance policy I had taken out at Sophie's insistence. Insurance will pay out within months, she continued. 7 million, more than enough for us to start over somewhere new, somewhere no one knows us. I silently returned to bed, processing this new information. My death had never been an accident. Sophie hadn't just been planning to leave me, she had been planning to kill me. The next morning, I called my mechanic and had my car towed for inspection. Sure enough, the brake lines had been carefully, professionally tampered with, damage that would appear as wear and tear to most investigators. I had the brakes repaired but told no one. Instead, I accelerated my timeline. The game was ending sooner than I had planned, but I was more than ready. I canceled our dinner reservation at Riverside Bistro, the restaurant that would have led to my fatal drive home. Sophie's poorly concealed disappointment confirmed everything I had learned. I thought we were celebrating at Riverside, she said, trying to hide her annoyance behind a pout. I already told everyone we'd be there. I wanted something more intimate for our anniversary, I replied, watching her scramble to adjust her plans. Something special just for us. The final pieces were now in place. 5 years of patience, of watching and waiting, of building my strength while she thought I was blind to her betrayals, were about to pay off. The empire I had built in secret was ready to support me when I walked away. The evidence I had gathered was ready to crush her when I left. Tonight would be our last anniversary, but not for the reasons Sophie had planned. Tonight, I would finally reveal that I knew everything that I had always known, that her schemes had failed before they even began. I sent a message to my lawyer, confirming that everything was ready for tomorrow. Then I began preparing Sophie's favorite meal for an anniversary dinner she would never forget. I spent the afternoon preparing Sophie's favorite meal with methodical precision. Seared scallops with risotto, asparagus with hollandaise, and that expensive Chardonnay she loved. Each element was executed perfectly, just as I had executed my long-term plan. The dining room looked immaculate. Candles lit, flowers arranged, soft music playing in the background. To anyone looking in, it appeared to be the setting for a romantic anniversary celebration. Only I knew it was the stage for an ending. Sophie arrived home later than expected, clearly frustrated by the change in plans. I watched her mask that frustration with a smile as she entered the dining room. "This is unexpected," she said, eyeing the elaborate setting with poorly concealed disappointment. "I thought we were going out." "I wanted something more intimate for our last anniversary," I replied, watching confusion flicker across her face. "Last? What do you mean?" I smiled, pulling out her chair. "You'll understand soon." Wine throughout dinner, Sophie maintained her performance, complimenting the food, reminiscing about our wedding, playing the role of devoted wife while her mind clearly worked to adjust whatever she and Eric had planned. Her phone buzzed several times. I recognized the pattern of Eric's special notification. Sophie checked it under the table, thinking I didn't notice. "Is everything all right?" I asked, refilling her wine glass. "Just work," she lied smoothly. "You know how they are, demanding attention even on our anniversary." "Loyalty is important," I agreed, watching her miss the irony completely. "In all relationships." Between the main course and dessert, I excused myself briefly, returning with a folder that I placed next to the chocolate soufflé I had prepared. Sophie barely glanced at it, assuming it contained anniversary papers or perhaps details of a surprise vacation. "I have something for you too," she said, reaching for her purse. "Though I was planning to give it to you after dinner at the restaurant." "Open mine first," I suggested, nodding toward the folder. She lifted it, expecting jewelry documentation or vacation vouchers. Her face paled as she recognized the divorce papers inside, then flushed with anger as she flipped through the pages detailing my terms. "What is this?" Her voice barely a whisper. "Freedom," I replied calmly. "For both of us. I don't understand." "The Fairmont Hotel, room 718, 2 weeks ago," I said evenly. "The cabin in Aspen last month, the apartment you've been paying for on Briar Street with my company's money." Should I continue? Shock registered first, then swift denial. "Marcus, you're imagining things. I would never. You've been embezzling funds for over 3 years, Sophie. Transferring money to support Eric's failing gallery and your secret life together." She abandoned the denial strategy, shifting instantly to damage control. "It's not what you think. Eric is an old friend who needed help. There's nothing romantic between us." "I have video of you together in our bed," I said, my voice remaining calm. "Audio of you planning my accident on that winding road near Riverside." The mechanic found the tampered brake lines this morning. Her face went from flush to ashen in seconds. For once, Sophie had no ready lie, no counter strategy. She lunged for my hand across the table, desperation in her eyes. Marcus, please, we can work through this. I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you. Eric manipulated me, made me believe things that weren't true. The board also knows about the money, Sophie, all $300,000 of it. Her grip on my hand tightened. I'll pay it back. We can fix this. I love you, not him. It was always you. I gently extricated my hand from hers. Oh, and I canceled our reservation at Riverside, I added. I wouldn't want you to get caught in that terrible accident on the drive home tomorrow night. Her face went white. What accident? What are you talking about? The one that killed me in another life, I said, standing up from the table. The one you and Eric planned so carefully but won't happen this time. Confusion replaced fear on her face. You're not making sense. Marcus, please sit down. We need to talk about this. There's nothing left to discuss. The divorce papers are filed, your belongings are packed in the guest room closet. You have until tomorrow to remove them from the property. She stood to, her composure cracking completely. You can't do this to me after everything we've built together. You built nothing, I replied. You only took, and now there's nothing left for you to take. Where am I supposed to go? Tears began to fall, whether genuine or another performance, I no longer cared to determine. I believe Eric has space at his apartment, the one I've been paying for without your knowledge. Her eyes widened at this final revelation. You knew all this time. I've always known, Sophie, from the very beginning. I walked toward the door, pausing to collect my coat and the small suitcase I had packed earlier. Sophie followed, her control abandoned completely now. Marcus, don't leave like this. Give me a chance to explain. 5 years together has to mean something. I turned to look at her one last time, this woman who had planned my death, who had betrayed me in 2 lifetimes. In her eyes, I saw not remorse for her actions, but fear of their consequences. Goodbye, Sophie. Eric's waiting for you, just like he always has been. I closed the door on her protests, on the life we had shared, on the death she had planned for me. The night air felt clean and fresh, like breathing for the first time after years underwater. My phone began buzzing immediately with Sophie's calls and messages. I didn't need to read them to know their content, the progression from anger to bargaining to desperate pleading. I silenced the notifications and drove to the hotel where I would stay until my new apartment was ready. The next morning, my lawyer confirmed that Sophie had been removed from all company accounts and positions. The board had received the evidence of her embezzlement, but agreed, at my request, to handle the matter privately as long as she repaid the funds and signed a non-disclosure agreement. I didn't want revenge, just resolution. The satisfaction of walking away on my terms was enough. For the next 6 months, I watched from a distance as Sophie's carefully constructed world collapsed. Eric left when he realized there would be no insurance payout, no windfall to fund their new life. The art gallery closed. Sophie's social standing, built entirely on her position as my wife, evaporated overnight. Her attempts to contact me grew more desperate, then less frequent, and finally stopped altogether. Mutual friends reported that she had moved to another city, starting over with nothing but the generous settlement I had offered despite her betrayal. Meanwhile, my company quadrupled in value after a merger I had carefully orchestrated. The CEO stepped down as planned, and the board unanimously appointed me as his successor. The investments I had made based on my future knowledge continued to pay dividends beyond what even I had anticipated. I built a new home, established new routines, developed new relationships based on honesty rather than calculation. The weight of betrayal lifted slowly, like a morning fog burning away in sunlight. 1 year after our last anniversary, as I prepared to move to our international headquarters overseas, a letter arrived from Sophie, the final communication after months of silence. I never deserved you, she wrote. Eric left when the money ran out. Everything fell apart. I see now what I threw away. Not just your wealth, but your loyalty, your heart. If I could go back and change everything, I would. I never stopped loving you even when I convinced myself otherwise. I folded the letter and placed it in a box with other remnants of that life, neither angry nor satisfied, simply finished. Some chapters aren't meant to be reread, some wounds aren't meant to be reopened. That evening at a small cafe near my new apartment, I noticed a woman at the next table, something about her vaguely familiar. She looked up, recognition dawning in her eyes. Marcus Evans, you probably don't remember me. I worked at your wife's company years ago. Janet Miller. The name triggered a distant memory, a Christmas party from my first life, this woman attempting to warn me about Sophie and Eric, a warning I had dismissed as jealousy or misunderstanding. I remember, I said, offering her the chair across from me. Though it's been a long time, I heard about your divorce, she said. I wanted to reach out back then to tell you what I knew, but it seemed inappropriate. I appreciate the thought, I replied. But I learned the truth on my own eventually. We talked for hours, not about Sophie or the past, but about books and travel and second chances. For the first time in either of my lives, I felt the weight of betrayal fully lifting. Some wounds never completely heal, but they remind us of what we've survived. Some betrayals never fully fade from memory, but they teach us to recognize loyalty when we finally find it. And sometimes, when fate grants us a second chance, the best revenge isn't inflicting pain but building a life too good to include those who once caused it. Janet Miller became a surprisingly comfortable presence in my new life. Our coffee conversation extended to dinner, then to regular meetings over the following weeks. Unlike Sophie, Janet had no agenda beyond genuine connection, no hidden motives I needed to guard against. I never understood what you saw in Sophie, she admitted during one of our dinners, 3 months after our chance reunion. Even before I knew about Eric, something about her seemed calculated. Love blinds us to the obvious, I replied, remembering how completely I had missed the signs in my first life. We see what we want to see. I didn't tell Janet about my rebirth, about living these years twice, about knowing the future before it unfolded. Some truths are too strange to share, even with those we trust. Instead, I told her I had sensed something was wrong but ignored my instincts until evidence became impossible to deny. The important thing is that you eventually saw the truth, Janet said. Some never do. My new position as CEO brought challenges that kept me focused on the present rather than dwelling on the past. The international expansion I had anticipated in my previous life unfolded even more successfully under my direct guidance. The company's value continued to rise, attracting attention from competitors and potential partners alike. One such potential partner was Eric's former mentor, a gallery owner who had distanced himself from Eric when Sophie's embezzlement came to light. He approached our company about sponsoring an international art exhibition, unaware of my connection to his former protege. During our meeting, he mentioned Eric in passing. Such promise completely squandered. Last I heard, he was working as a hotel concierge in Miami, barely making ends meet. A cautionary tale about character being more important than talent. I felt no satisfaction at Eric's downfall, only a strange sense of closure. The man who had conspired with my wife to take my life was now experiencing his own form of death, the death of his artistic ambitions, the death of the future he had planned with Sophie. The exhibition sponsorship proved beneficial for both parties, generating positive publicity for the company while supporting artists who, unlike Eric, had both talent and integrity. 8 months after my final conversation with Sophie, a business trip took me to Boston, the city where she had relocated according to mutual friends. I felt no desire to seek her out, no lingering questions that needed answers. The chapter was closed, the book shelved, yet fate had other plans. As I exited a restaurant following a business dinner, I saw her across the street, exiting a small art gallery. She looked different, thinner, her expensive clothes replaced by simpler attire, her confident stride now hesitant. For a moment, I considered ducking into my waiting car before she noticed me. But some force, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a desire for final confirmation that I was truly free of her influence, kept me rooted to the spot. Sophie looked up, her eyes meeting mine across the busy street. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher from that distance. She raised her hand slightly, perhaps in greeting, perhaps in question. I nodded once, acknowledging her presence but offering nothing more. Then I entered my car, directing the driver to continue to the hotel. Through the window, I saw Sophie still standing there, watching the car pull away, a stillness in her posture that spoke of lost opportunities and belated regrets. That brief, wordless encounter proved more healing than any confrontation could have been. I felt no anger seeing her, no pain, no desire to speak or listen. She had become what all past loves eventually become, A memory without power, a lesson learned but no longer needed. Back at my hotel, I found an email from Janet waiting, asking about my trip and sharing news of a book she thought I might enjoy. The simple, genuine communication stood in stark contrast to the complex manipulations that had characterized my relationship with Sophie. I called Janet instead of replying to the email, surprising both of us with an impulsive invitation. "Would you like to join me in Boston tomorrow? There's a museum exhibition I think you'd appreciate." Her hesitation lasted only seconds. "I'd love to. I can catch the morning train." That weekend marked a turning point, Janet and I exploring the city as friends who might become something more, enjoying conversations that required no strategic calculation, no defense against hidden agendas. 1 year and 3 months after my final dinner with Sophie, Janet and I stood on the balcony of my new coastal villa, thousands of miles from the life I had once lived. The ocean stretched before us, vast and unchanging, a reminder that some forces remain constant even as our lives transform around them. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you had stayed with her?" Janet asked, her question free of jealousy, merely curious. "I know exactly what would have happened," I replied, thinking of the fatal crash, the crushed chest, the text messages revealing betrayal as my life ebbed away. "And I'm grateful every day that it didn't." Janet leaned against the railing, studying my face. "You speak sometimes as if you've lived more than one life, as if you know things you shouldn't be able to know," more perceptive than I had given her credit for. I smiled, neither confirming nor denying. "We all live multiple lives in a way, the ones we actually live and the ones we might have lived if we had made different choices." She accepted this non-answer with a nod, turning back to watch the sunset over the water. "I'm glad you made the choices that led you here." I slipped my arm around her waist, feeling the simple rightness of the gesture. "So am I." That evening, a delivery arrived, a small package forwarded from my former address. Inside was a book, Sophie's novel, published by a small press in Boston. A note fell from between the pages. "You were right about everything. I'm trying to build something honest now, something real. This story is part of that process." No expectations, no requests, just a thank you for walking away when you did. It forced me to finally see myself clearly. "Sophie." I placed the book on a shelf without reading it. "Some stories aren't ours to finish. Some characters continue their development off the page, beyond our view or influence." I wished her well in the privacy of my thoughts, then turned my attention back to the life I was building, the future extending before me like the endless ocean. 2 years after my rebirth, I had built a life that my former self could never have imagined. Not just the material success, which exceeded even my strategic planning, but the emotional freedom that came from recognizing manipulation before becoming entangled in it, from choosing connection based on mutual respect rather than calculated advantage. Janet moved into the villa 6 months later, bringing with her the straightforward affection I had once thought was all I wanted from Sophie. We built routines together, planned trips, discussed possibilities that had nothing to do with hidden agendas or secret betrayals. "What made you notice me that day at the cafe?" she asked one evening as we walked along the beach. "You could have ignored me, focused on your meal, avoided the connection entirely." I thought about the Christmas party from my first life, her attempted warning that I had dismissed. I thought about second chances, not just mine but the ones we offer others through our attention, our willingness to see them. "Maybe I was finally ready to see what was right in front of me," I replied. "Sometimes we need to lose everything to recognize what's truly valuable." Life continued its forward motion, memories of my previous existence fading like photographs left too long in sunlight. Occasionally, I would recall the sensation of hanging upside down in that crashed car, the final revelation of betrayal lighting up the shattered phone. But those memories no longer carried pain, only gratitude for the second chance I had been granted. Sophie's novel received modest acclaim, a story about a woman who loses herself in the pursuit of security, who betrays the one person who truly loved her, who must rebuild herself from the wreckage of her own making. I never read beyond the jacket copy, preferring to leave her story as she had left mine, acknowledged but not followed to its conclusion. Janet never pressed for details about my past with Sophie beyond what I volunteered. She understood intuitively that some wounds heal better without constant examination, that trust builds in the spaces where questions could be asked but aren't 3 years after my rebirth, we married in a simple ceremony overlooking the ocean. No elaborate performance, no strategic guest list, no hidden agendas. Just two people choosing each other with clear eyes and honest intentions. The happiness I found wasn't a replacement for what I had lost, but something entirely new built on a foundation of truth rather than illusion. The betrayal that had defined my first life became merely a chapter in my second, important but no longer definitive. Sometimes I wonder if my rebirth was chance, divine intervention, or something else entirely. But the reason matters less than the opportunity it provided, the chance to rewrite not just my own destiny but to influence others through different choices. Sophie ran to her ex behind my back, but reborn with future knowledge, I let her go cold. Not from vengeance or bitterness, but from the understanding that some people are not meant to walk beside us, no matter how desperately we once wanted them to. And in that letting go, I found a freedom neither of us could have imagined in our first shared life. The years with Janet unfolded with a natural rhythm, seasons of growth and change unmeasured by calculation or strategy. Our coastal villa became a home filled with genuine laughter, honest disagreements, and the kind of peace that comes from mutual respect. Her work as an art curator complemented my business ventures, our professional lives intersecting occasionally but maintaining healthy independence. "Do you ever regret not having children?" Janet asked one evening as we watched the sunset from our terrace. 5 years into our marriage, the question stirred memories of my first life, of the family Sophie and I had planned but never created. "Sometimes I wonder about it," I admitted. "But I've never felt something was missing between us." Janet nodded, her hand finding mine. "I feel the same way. I just wanted to check that we were still aligned." This simple exchange, this straightforward communication about something that would have spawned weeks of manipulation and hidden agendas with Sophie, reinforced how different my second life had become. Our decision to establish a foundation supporting young artists came naturally, an extension of Janet's passion and my resources. The Marcus and Janet Evans Foundation provided scholarships and exhibition opportunities for talented creators who might otherwise struggle for recognition. During the Foundation's third annual exhibition, a familiar name appeared among the applicants: Eric's daughter from a relationship predating his involvement with Sophie. Her talent was undeniable, her submission demonstrating the promise her father had squandered. "We should recuse ourselves from this decision," I suggested to Janet after sharing the connection. "To avoid any appearance of bias either for or against." Janet studied the portfolio again. The committee selected her work on merit alone without knowing the connection. Denying her the opportunity because of her father's actions would perpetuate a cycle of punishment that helps no one. Her wisdom, as always, cut through my lingering defensiveness. The young woman received the same consideration as every other applicant, ultimately earning a place in the exhibition based solely on her work's quality. At the opening reception, I found myself face to face with Eric's daughter, a young woman with her father's artistic eye but hopefully a more solid character. "Mr. Evans," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for this opportunity. It means more than you know." "Your work earned its place," I replied honestly. "We simply provided the venue." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what she needed to say next. "My father mentioned that he knew you years ago. He said there was history I should be aware of before accepting the Foundation's support." I appreciated both her directness and Eric's apparent honesty with his daughter. "There is history," I acknowledged, "but it doesn't extend to you or your work. The past remains where it belongs in the past." The relief on her face was evident. "He's different now," she offered. "Working as an art teacher at a community center in Chicago, he talks about mistakes and consequences a lot." I nodded, neither needing nor wanting additional details. "I wish him well." That brief exchange brought an unexpected sense of closure. Eric had apparently found some form of redemption, not the glamorous future he had plotted with Sophie, but perhaps something more sustainable, more honest. News of Sophie came less directly. Her novel had spawned 2 sequels, forming a trilogy about redemption and self-discovery. A minor literary success, the books had found an audience among women reassessing their life choices. Janet had read them all, sharing occasional insights without pressuring me to engage with that part of my past. "She's married again," Janet mentioned casually one morning, reading literary news on her tablet. "To her publisher, it seems. They're expecting their first child. I absorbed this information without the storm of emotions it might once have triggered. I hope she's found what she was looking for. Janet set down her tablet, studying my face. Does it bother you knowing she's building a new life? No, I considered the question carefully. In my first life, I would have been devastated by her happiness with someone else. Now I hope she's learned enough to treat him better than she treated me. Janet raised an eyebrow. First life, I smiled, realizing my slip. After 8 years together, perhaps it was time to share the full truth. It's a long story, one you might find difficult to believe. Try me, she replied, settling back in her chair, so I told her everything. The fatal crash the text messages revealed in my dying moments, waking up 5 years earlier, recognizing the manipulation I had missed the first time, building a different future armed with knowledge no one should possess. Janet listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful rather than skeptical. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. It explains so much, she finally said. The investments that always seem too prescient, the way you sometimes speak about events as if you've already experienced them, your absolute certainty about Sophie's betrayal from the beginning. You believe me? I hadn't expected acceptance so readily. I believe you believe it, she replied carefully. And whether it was a literal rebirth or some kind of profound psychological break that gave you clarity, the result is the same. You were given a second chance and you used it well. Her pragmatic response was so characteristic, so perfectly Janet, that I laughed with genuine joy. This was why we worked, this ability to accept each other's truths without needing to reshape them. 10 years after my rebirth, we decided to relocate to a smaller coastal town, seeking a quieter pace as we entered a new phase of life. The foundation continued its work under capable management. My business interests remained profitable with minimal direct involvement, and Janet had transitioned from curator to creator, developing her own artistic practice. Our new home overlooked a different ocean but provided the same sense of expansiveness, of possibilities stretching beyond the horizon. We established new routines, made new friends, built a life focused more on experience than achievement. One evening, as we walked along the beach near our home, Janet stopped suddenly, pointing toward a figure in the distance. Isn't that Sophie? I followed her gaze, recognizing the silhouette even after all these years. Sophie was walking with a man, presumably her publisher husband, a small child running ahead of them along the shoreline. Should we avoid them? Janet asked, squeezing my hand. I considered the question, searching for any lingering pain or resentment and finding none. No need, they're just people enjoying the same beach we are. As we continued walking, our paths inevitably crossed. Sophie looked up, recognition dawning in her eyes, followed by uncertainty. The man beside her noticed her hesitation. Everything all right? He asked. Sophie glanced between him and me, then made her decision. James, this is Marcus Evans, an old friend. Marcus, my husband James, and our daughter Lily. Friend was a generous rewriting of our history, but I appreciated the intent behind it. Nice to meet you, I said to James, then to Sophie. It's been a long time. You look well, she offered. Both of you. Janet extended her hand to Sophie. I'm Janet Evans. Marcus has told me about you. Something passed between the two women, an understanding that required no elaboration. Sophie nodded slightly. All good things, I hope. Honest things, Janet replied. The child, bored with adult conversation, tugged at her father's hand. Can we get ice cream now? The mundane request broke the tension, reminding us all that life continues its forward motion regardless of past complications. We exchanged brief pleasantries about the town and the weather before continuing in opposite directions along the beach. Are you okay? Janet asked as Sophie's family receded into the distance. I considered the question carefully, wanting to give an honest answer rather than a reassuring one. Yes, I said finally. It feels like seeing characters from a book I read long ago. I remember the story, but it no longer feels like my story. Janet nodded, understanding as always. Some people enter our lives to teach us what we don't want, making space for what we do. That night I dreamed of the crash for the first time in years, but the dream transformed before reaching its tragic conclusion. Instead of pain and betrayal, I felt a strange gratitude for the death that had allowed a rebirth, for the ending that had created the possibility of a different beginning. I woke to find Janet watching me, concern in her eyes. You were talking in your sleep, she said, something about messages and dying. I pulled her close, anchoring myself in the present rather than either past. Just old memories surfacing. Nothing that matters anymore. We fell back asleep in each other's arms, two people who had chosen each other with clear eyes and honest hearts, building a life neither of us could have anticipated but both of us cherished. The morning brought no lingering shadows, no renewed pain, only the peaceful certainty that comes from living authentically. Sophie ran to her ex behind my back, but reborn with future knowledge, I let her go cold. And in that release, that strategic surrender, I found not just escape from betrayal, but the path to genuine connection. Some say that living well is the best revenge. But I discovered something more valuable. Living well isn't about revenge at all. It's about recognizing when to walk away, when to let go of what was never truly yours, and when to embrace what genuinely belongs in your life. My second chance wasn't about rewriting the past, but creating a different future, one where betrayal became merely a detour rather than a destination. One where cold calculation gave way to warm truth. One where letting go created space for holding on to what mattered most.